Okay, on this video I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to draw the human skull. I'm using the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil. The program I'm going to be using is Procreate. It is the program that I use for all of my digital work these days. And I'm going to be using, if you can see here, it's quite difficult to squeeze it into the frame considering my camera is quite low, but you can see I'm actually using a kind of resin plastic model of a human skull. So this is what I'm going to be using to assist me in my drawing. I do enjoy drawing from the human skeleton and the human form, mainly for just researching and learning how to draw these things correctly. And also it's a really interesting form to show off their capabilities again, like my other videos of the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil. But more than that, I hope that the tutorial will be useful for anyone drawing, regardless of whether you're using an iPad Pro or real paper and pencil, because the technology has got to the stage now where using a stylus on the screen is so close to paper and pencil that the same rules apply regardless of which medium you're using. So to begin with, considering that I am using Procreate and an iPad, I'm just going to show you very briefly which tools I'm going to be using for the drawing. So in terms of the colour, I've chosen quite a dark grey, but not a complete black. And in terms of the brush on Procreate, or the pencil as it were, I've chosen a sketching tool, and I've chosen just an ordinary HP pencil. Within the HP settings, I've got it set so that the opacity changes the more I press on, so it's pressure sensitive. I think I will turn the size down. I don't want it to change too much in terms of size, and that's pretty much it. I've got the size of the pencil up to maximum, and I've got the opacity almost at maximum. Basically you just sort of set it so it feels authentically like a pencil for yourself, I guess. That's certainly the way that I'm enjoying using the pencil at the moment. So I'm going to pick an obvious starting place, which would be the nose. I mean, there isn't a nose, but there's a kind of cavity where the nose would be. I'm going to just loosely sketch in. Now it's roughly kind of like a stretched out triangle shape. I'm not going to get into the detail to begin with. I'm just going to draw the rough kind of shapes, and then I'm going to start adding in some of the details. It may be that I need to reduce the size later on, but that's the advantage of working digitally. If I decide that I can't fit the sort of top of the skull in, I'll just use this tool, reposition it, resize it later. Okay, you can see the next main feature I'm putting in are the eye shapes, the eye sockets. Now these three shapes are probably the most important factors on the human skull. Very important that you get these correct to start with. You'll notice, like I said before, it's a rough kind of triangle shape, quite stretched out at the top. These you could describe as being like a square shape, but twisted on the side like that. So for example, if I were to grab that section and adjust that area, see that it kind of roughly describes that kind of shape. I don't need that shape anymore, so I shall just delete that. It was just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to reduce it slightly so I make sure I fit it all on. One of the advantages of working digitally, and perhaps if I was using real paper and pencil, I would have taken a bit more care at the start to make sure it all fits on the page. But knowing that I can always adjust it, it does free you up and liberate you to just get started, regardless of whether you're going to make any mistakes or not. So the next thing I'm going to start adding is the kind of the top lip, if you like, above the teeth and below the nose. So that it is symmetrical, so you can draw a line that sort of cuts straight up and down of the skull. So everything is going to be roughly symmetrical on either side. So now I'm just getting the kind of positions in. There is a top lip here, which depending on your angle, on my angle it's fairly straight. I mean, if I was looking at it from above, you would get more of a curve like that, which looks ridiculous as it happens. It looks like a smile, but it'd be more of a straight line. And then you've got the kind of cheekbones that would stick out. Now I could cheat and copy select an area on here, and 3 fingers drag down will give me the ability to copy, and then I could paste it and flip it onto the other side. But I'm doing this in the proper traditional way, so I'll just get rid of the select tools. I don't want to do any cheating in this video. Oops, would help if I went back to the pencil. Now all skulls are different, just like all faces are different, so there's no hard and fast rules when it comes to this, but I find that people tend to over-exaggerate the kind of roundness of the top there. So, you know, it may have walls that go up the side and then a bit more of almost a point at the top. When it comes down here, you'll see that this line kind of continues underneath of the cheekbone. Again, it continues that straight line a little bit. Again, on this side, it continues that straight line. Now, when you come to draw it yourself, it's a case of trial and error. You might find that you do the bottom jaw too low down, you've elongated it too much. It's a case of training your eye and just getting it so it looks right. Again, human skulls are different, just like all human faces are different. So I'm just going to get the map in some of the basics for now, and then before I get to start doing any shading or any really fine detail, I'm just going to block in where some of the features belong. This area here is roughly where the teeth are going to go. So there's a bit of a curve here, and almost like a couple of corners where the canine teeth, or the two kind of, I don't know the technical term for some of these teeth, but there's 2 front kind of lower jaw teeth that jut out a little bit there. I'll just get the centre of the nasal kind of canal, whatever you, I don't know how to describe that, a bit clearer. Now, a common mistake that I see when it comes to the side of the eye socket here is to make the gap here too big, but it's actually quite a thin, narrow strip really that hugs quite close to the eye socket, like that. And you can see now, even at this early stage really, that the basic forms are in place. From this point in, it's about refining and getting the details just right. Now, you might be tempted in the eye socket just to shade it in dark and forget the fact that there are details within the eye socket. Now, if I just move the skull to show you, you can see this within the camera frame. But if you notice, deep in the eye socket there are actually different holes, one up there, and then there's a kind of longer gap and hole there, kind of a slot. So you shouldn't miss out on all these details, they're all crucial. And the next detail I'm going to be focusing on will be the kind of holes through the kind of nasal passage there. Now, it's a fairly accurate skull, it's not the most expensive one, it's a fairly cheap one as it goes, but even the cheaper versions tend to be quite accurate. So I'm going to totally trust and rely on every mark and every line that's on this and just trust that it is completely accurate. Now, when it comes to adding details to the nose, the whole kind of area of the nose is in shade because it is quite deep, it's recessed into the skull. So there will definitely be some details that are darker than others, but the overall impression is going to be that it's considerably darker than anything else. Like I say though, within this area there is a dividing shape here. Some really quite unexpected and unusual shapes within this area too. It's not just a hole, it's not just a gap, it has quite a lot in terms of form going on. It really pays to work from a model or a real object, because there's details that you will see on the real form with the naked eye that you would never see on a photograph or somebody else's illustration. Now, this next section, which is the kind of brow ridge, again is going to vary depending on the particular model that you're working from. Obviously a male and female forehead and brow ridge is going to be different, but also individuals obviously demonstrate different degrees of brow ridge and how it sticks out. But some of the shapes in here are crucial really to try and describe and make it look more 3D. Now, there's not a definite line here, it's all to do with shading and tonal work, but it's quite subtle, some of the transitions is really quite important. You see that it's sort of lower and come down to an imaginary point there. And there might also be a kind of a very subtle shape that comes in here. Now my light source is generally from this side on the model skull, so there'll be more of a shadow on this brow ridge, but maybe more illumination, more light on this side. So it's mainly on this part of the skull that it's going to be describing the shapes. Now, considering that also the light is coming from here, it's going to be this side of the skull that has the most shading and tone. Now again, you should use the tonal qualities and the shading to help describe the form. So it is a round kind of shape, so the tone gradually gets thinner as it goes around, and it helps describe that shape overall. Now I'm just going to do a kind of soft grey over this side of the skull completely, because this side is primarily in shade compared to the other side, by contrast to the other side. I'm not doing a dark grey because there's definitely a difference between some of the shaded areas and others. Some bits are going to be relatively light and some bits are going to be quite dark, but there needs to be an ability to spot the difference. But I'm just placing in a kind of a light grey just to help differentiate it from the other side a little bit more. It's very important to remember to leave little highlights that help describe some of the shapes, and if you do happen to forget to leave them there, you can always add them later. So with the eraser tool, just like you could with a putty rubber or other erasing tools with a real pencil, you can help redefine edges, put in highlights, then helps describe the shape a little bit better later on. Now I have drawn in a guideline there at the centre, but actually there is a line, a seam that seems to go up the centre of quite large parts of the skull, and perhaps most apparent on the upper lip and the nose there. So though it's been there initially as a guide, this line is not a line that we need to rub out in the end, because it is actually part of the form itself and a quite important part. Now I'm just going to move down into the kind of jaw area, add some of the extra finer details. Again, there's a line that runs up the side there, and pretty much that side of that line is going to be fairly shaded. But then there is quite a prominent ridge which will have quite a highlight on it, and then a dark side to it here. But perhaps the darkest bit on that side will be a gap actually here. Although I'm not going to do a black background, which is why I've just deleted it. I'll just do the outline of the gap instead. And then all the bits of bone that are in the background there, deep into the skull, will be the bits of shadow. This section here, this little shape, is actually a hole all the way through. So if I just show you on the actual skull, if you can see, quite clearly through there is quite a big gap, if you can see the angle I'm kind of looking at roughly. Now when I come to do studies like this, I do prefer to exaggerate some of the lines really. If I was going for a completely photographic look, then this line wouldn't exist really, especially on the side that has the light hitting it. I want to create a mixture of something that looks sort of quite realistic in terms of the light and the effects of light, but also exists as a line drawing quite clearly too. I find that the mixture of the two really benefits, because you get the realism, but also you get the real vivid description of the shapes at the same time. An interesting little feature discovered through drawing the skulls quite often is there's a little kind of hole here within the kind of cheekbone below the eye socket. I believe it's where the kind of veins of the face and blood flow connects various different muscle tissues on the facial features. Quite an unusual little detail that shouldn't be ignored. All these little factors add into the overall image. Likewise, there seems to be around this area too a line, a kind of seam, where clearly the bone areas have been separate. So it's not that it's broken, it's just the way that the skull is actually formed. Okay, I'm going to move on to the teeth of the skull. All skulls look a bit strange unless they have teeth, so it is the kind of defining feature perhaps of a skull to have a nice set of pearly whites, a good set of teeth. So first thing I'm going to do is start with counting the number of teeth actually, so make sure that I'm by the end result. I'm going to try and draw each tooth individually anyway, but it's as well to sometimes count them. So we just count the two at the front and the top row. On this particular example, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 teeth at the front. Having said that, you wouldn't necessarily see all of them, but I'm going to draw the points at which they kind of meet here. Now it may be that some of the top row are slightly bigger, so I'm giving them a little bit more space. So I'm going to map in very roughly initially. Now you notice at the top of the teeth it's quite an exaggerated curve, and then it comes down and there's much flatter shape towards the bottom. It's still not flat, it's not a straight line, but they seem to be much rounder as they go into the gums at the top. Again, obviously the amount of teeth and the condition of the teeth depends on the model that you're working from. Having said that, the models tend to be quite a good example. And if you're working from a real skull, obviously the teeth won't necessarily be in the best of condition, but the model skulls tend to show you a kind of ideal version. Okay, I'll work back into those in a few minutes. I'm just going to start placing in some of the bottom teeth. So I'm just getting the position of them initially before I move into much of the detail. Okay, so the rough position of the teeth I'm relatively happy with, but obviously now I need to start focusing in and getting some of the details just that little bit more accurate. Now that includes, in this particular example, you can really see some of the gaps between the teeth where it's quite dark in the spaces between them. Perhaps I may even turn the size of the pencil down for some of the finer details here. So I guess that's the equivalent to sharpening your pencil if you were using a real paper and pencil. Now you might notice in this area there's a kind of overhang here that has a bit of a shadow on the underside of it because the light's slightly from above the top edge, and then underneath there's a bit more shadow because it kind of angles differently. Now, just like the whole side of the skull, obviously this side of the teeth are going to be more in shadow than this side, so as they go further back here they get increasingly more shadow than highlights. Now, to emphasize these shapes that stick out, obviously to make them seem like real 3D things, they need to have a slight shadow on one side of them. It will really help describe those forms. So you can see on this side of it it's darker, and on this side it's lighter. More exaggerated on this side of the skull anyway. Now, just like there's a slight kind of hole in the cheekbone, there's a kind of matching one or a very similar detail in the lower jaw too. Again, I think it's where blood vessels and veins would grow through that part of the lower jaw to give a blood supply to the facial features. I think that's as far as I'm going to take this drawing. I could take it to even more detail, but I think I've got all the basic information down, and I'm quite happy to leave it at that stage for now. If you've enjoyed watching this tutorial and this demonstration, please take a look at my other videos and subscribe to my channel. I do plan on doing lots more of these types of videos, maybe even revisiting the skull from different angles. So thanks very much for watching. See you again.